you've just been overspending on branded search. Of these accounts that I'm auditing, the vast majority of them, their highest spending campaign every single time is branded search. Think about like what a branded search is. Somebody typing your brand name, and then that first result on the Google page is going to be a branded ad. If your SEO is very good, you will own those 2 to 3 organic listings underneath that branded ad. Why are we spending on an ad that people will just click the free version of directly below? Pull back and then watch what happens to GA4 organic revenue. Immediately, what most agencies will see is their in-platform branded search revenue going down. But what you'll see is that organic revenue is ticking upwards to the exact same degree that you're losing the in-platform revenue.
Content from real people equals instant credibility for your brand. Consumers today crave real connections with real people, and they're guarded about who they'll trust. Highly polished, branded content simply doesn't cut it anymore. Let Misuse build a network of powerful micro-influencers around your brand who all know and love your products. They'll create something compelling that resonates with their audience and deliver it directly to you for use across all your marketing channels. Yeah, that includes ads. Meet millennials and Gen Zers where they're already hanging out, in the feeds of their favorite influencers, and get started with Misuse. It's all killer, no filler. I'm Eric. I'm here with Rafael. Happens to be my favorite of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Also a lead on the Pilothouse Google team. Going to give you some common sense mistakes that we see people making all the time. Raf, kick it off. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I love the Rafael favorite pick on the Ninja Turtles. You don't hear that too often. I mean, he's kind of like the grumpiest of the turtles.
He's grumpy, he's complex, and I just realized that his weapons are not actually stabbing weapons. They're blunted. Sais are blunted. They're actually defensive weapons, which is why Master Splinter gave them to him, because he knew he was a hothead and was like, I can't give this guy the katanas or we'll have a lot of lawsuits on our hands.
So I just learned this the other day. Each turtle on the Ninja Turtles, their weapons are like the antithesis of their personalities. So
that's right.
Leonardo, Donatello, all of their weapons are actually...
Michelangelo, he's the least in control, yet the nunchucks, you have to be the most in control or you'll smack yourself in the head. I love that meme. What a great way to kick off this podcast.
Of course, yeah. No, we need to do a little bit of small talk on the turtles before we jump into the kind of nitty gritty here.
Awesome. Well, hopefully you can weave that metaphor through your Google Talk. Let's go.
100%. I will work on that. So yeah, let me intro myself. I've been working at Pilothouse for the last 5 years now, completely focused on Google Ads. We focus pretty heavily on e-com. I'd say like probably 20% of our clients are lead gen as well. So we have experience in that realm, but really I've just been kind of going deep on e-com clients. And yeah, wanted to talk about common errors, missed opportunities with Google. Like we were talking about earlier, I think a lot of the Google pods have been a little bit more technical and nuanced. So I wanted to keep this super broad. Anybody with a Google account really can kind of jump in, follow along and see if their ad team is kind of implementing some of these strategies here.
Let's go. Sounds great.
Yeah. So, I mean, for context, I'm pretty heavily involved in some of the auditing on our side. So I audit about 80 Google accounts a year. So just pulling some of the most common things that we see from that. And then first thing that I wanted to talk about here was the importance of split testing. So when you think about the complexity of Google Ads as a whole, just the different combinations of kind of campaigns that you can create. So we have 8 different campaign types. There's like 10 to 15 different bid strategies for each of those campaign types, thousands of kind of possible keywords that you can target. Probability law, that's tens of thousands of kind of possible combinations here. And I will speak from experience here. Every account is different. There isn't really a one size fits all solution. So really it comes down to split testing everything. And a good example of this is Performance Max versus shopping, right? So PMax being this kind of hybrid search, shopping, display, discovery campaign that Google's been pushing on most of its advertisers. You guys have talked about that on the pod before. It works pretty well. I would say it's successful about 80% of the time in terms of like new customer acquisition. We're seeing better costs from PMax, but it still leaves that 20% of accounts, which is a pretty significant number, that are getting better results from regular shopping. And One of the ways that brands split test this the most often is they'll run like a before and after experiment. So they'll run PMax for a month and then they'll run regular shopping for a month. They'll take a look at the ROAS, they'll see which one performs better. Of course, you're not accounting for a bunch of different variables in that seasonality, whether or not you're running a sale, et cetera, et cetera. Many, many different factors that can kind of play a role on the actual ROAS you're getting from that campaign, as opposed to just the fact that it's PMax versus shopping itself. So one of the things that I push pretty heavily for on our end at Google is running experiments. So experiments, again, you guys have covered this on the pod, but this is like the bread and butter of optimizing a Google account. You should be running experiments on literally everything. And the reason for that is it's the only way to run a truly statistically significant 50-50 split test. With an experiment, you're getting one user and then one user for the PMax versus shopping example, one user sent to the shopping campaign, one user sent to the Performance Max campaign. And then you'll be able to analyze those results a lot easier once you actually get a significant amount of data coming in. There's tons of other experiments. It really is, in my mind, the only way to split test anything on Google. With that PMax versus shopping example, very important to look at the GA4 results. Like I said, Google is pushing PMax on us right now. The campaign inherently uses view attribution, which we all know and love as marketers. So you'll see
you need to be aware of it, or it can burn you if you're not
100%.
taking it into account, right?
Yeah. So we've had PMax campaigns that are spending a few $1,000s a month, paused those campaigns. They continue to get sales for like the next 6 to 8 months afterwards. And it's like, is my PMax campaign that I ran in September of 2022 still generating incremental sales like 8 months later? Probably not, but Google says it is. So it's, you want to like measure that data first with a grain of salt, but also with like an alternative source. And just have that context. Like when you're looking at the performance, like you see that 4 ROAS from PMax and it's compared to a 2.0 in regular shopping. Using GA4, it will usually paint a much more favorable picture for regular shopping. So yeah, those are kind of like the nuances of PMax versus shopping.
But split testing is so important. One of the discourse I hear, I've actually heard some people lately kind of trashing PMax in the D2C Twitter sphere, saying that it isn't working quite as well as it is working for us. So it's good to hear that it is working. But I've also heard a lot of discourse about Google reps and how Google reps are just, maybe we have the best Google rep, maybe we have great Google reps, but Google reps are often pushing the company narrative and not always, they're thinking about how they make money, not as much about how you make money. And so that to me is where split testing really comes into effect, right? You can take advice from Google employees when they're telling you, what you should do, but just always make sure that you have the data to back it up, or they could waste some of your money.
100%. I mean, every time I listen to a Google rep, it always has to be with a bit of grain of salt. Like they're working for a for-profit company. Their goal is to kind of maximize your ad spend without destroying your account. And, typically we want to not destroy accounts. We want to scale them up in terms of revenue and ROAS. So yeah. And then the other part of that is absolutely like we always want to try to be proactive in tests because when PMax first came on the scene, anecdotally, like I was seeing better results from it than what we've seen in the last 6 months. It's been around for, just over 2 years now, I believe it's, and during that time, they've changed it so much, right? They've added more search term data, they've added asset group segmentation. So it's very different than what it used to be. And in my mind, on average, it's performing a little bit worse. So really, it's just split test over and over and over again. And that's kind of the most important thing. So that was a lot of filler and not a ton of killer. So I want to
just with one I don't, not to belabor the point, but can you give me an example without maybe mentioning the client of a split test? I know you're running these all the time, but like give me an example of a particularly effective or a split test that revealed a pretty acute difference that allowed you to really optimize and scale a campaign.
Yeah, 100%. So we have a jewelry brand. We were running exclusively Performance Max the day it was released practically. And we were seeing great ROAS results. And then, one of the things that we saw was when we scaled up that PMax spend, we're seeing really good revenue and platform and still strong ROAS. but it wasn't backing out to Shopify rev lift. So our Shopify rev wasn't increasing the same rate that our actual campaign revenue was increasing. And that was like kind of like my first flag, like, okay, this isn't one-to-one. Like at the time, the documentation on the view attribution that Performance Max was claiming was fairly iffy. So we switched to regular shopping, which had probably about a 30 to 40% lower ROAS. But when we're looking at the GA4 data, the new customer CPA on regular shopping was about 18 to 20% lower. So regular shopping was acquiring us new customers for cheaper. It's just the ROAS in platform was inflated on Performance Max. So by switching to regular shopping, we're able to acquire customers significantly cheaper at the exact same scale. And we're also hitting a better ROAS in GA4. And I've done that experiment with Northbeam as well. And again, we see pretty similar results on average. It's just in platform, like you really got to be careful about that revenue and ROAS that PMax is claiming, because it really looks like it inflates it quite consistently in my mind.
Incrementality is the name of the game, and new customers, right? I feel like PMax branded campaigns, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, can be great at bringing people that maybe otherwise would have been there anyway into the fold. Also good at bringing maybe returning customers, but when you're focusing on incrementality and new customers, you got to distill those variables a bit.
100%. And like, so this was kind of like a thought experiment that I was reading about on X the other day. And they were saying that because PMax is like this hybridization of search, shopping, display, etc., it has the ability to serve somebody like a display banner ad that it knows will be a returning customer, right? Because you upload all your customer lists into Google. It knows how frequently people purchase, when they purchase. It can serve them like a 10-cent CPM display ad to a returning customer that it predicts algorithmically is about to purchase, and boom, it claims credit for that purchase, just like that. What was the incrementality of that purchase? Probably nothing. Yet when you're sitting back and analyzing your accounts, you're seeing, oh, 6 ROAS, like that's fantastic. Like I need to scale that. But it doesn't show you like the actual incrementality of what went into that purchase. It's still a pretty big black box in my mind, like where the conversions actually came from. Like it's hard to parse out whether it was display, search. Like there's scripts that you can run to do so, but that becomes a little bit more complex. So yeah, I am kind of on the team of like, I don't enjoy using Performance Max because of the lack of insight and granularity it gives into the data. But I also understand that like sometimes like the data will call for that. And that's why it's come back right to the initial point here. So important to split test that, right? Like it's really a necessity, I think, for every account, especially when you're looking at like something like Google Shopping. Like that is going to be the majority in most cases for brands. Like that's the majority of their non-branded revenue is going to come from shopping.
Very cool. All right, we are gonna talk about branded search, but we've got a topic in between here. We're talking about the lack of awareness keywords. What do you mean by this?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, again, like what is Google? Like particularly Google search, it's people asking questions. Like they're not necessarily looking to shop. And so one of the things that we've thought about a lot is like, how do we take advantage of kind of that question-oriented mindset as opposed to like a purchase-oriented mindset with a pay-per-click strategy? So very standard Google strategy is you take your keyword, you send them to the product page, right? Let's use an example, mushroom coffee. If you have a mushroom coffee brand, you're going to target the keyword mushroom coffee. You're going to send them to the product page. Those, using that example, we have a mushroom coffee brand. Those are $5 to $6 clicks that don't convert very well, because when somebody's in a shopping mindset on Google, they're clicking around to a variety of brands, they're comparing price points, et cetera, et cetera. Price point, very important on Google. So if you don't have the best one, like a lot of the times you will struggle to convert. With that particular brand, we were really struggling to convert on the mushroom coffee search. The clicks were extremely expensive. So we rethought the strategy a little bit, and we're like, why don't we go more upper funnel and instead target people searching for what is lion's mane? The coffee was it was a lion's mane mushroom coffee. And those clicks are 60 cents. And so I started applying that strategy more and more to other brands because the awareness side of the keywords, it's almost always about 50 to 60% less for the actual clicks. You do take a hit on intent because you can't send somebody searching what is lion's mane to a lion's mane coffee PDP, of course, right? They're looking to learn about lion's mane, and then simultaneously, if you can introduce them to your brand and convince them to maybe purchase your product, that's a win. But you can afford to take a hit to conversion rate because you're only paying a fraction for the actual click itself. So it's more of a kind of nurturing strategy, right? Like we're not trying to extract sales directly from the user, but we're trying to nurture them via brand awareness to eventually purchase our product. So with campaigns like that, we still run purchase objective, but we'll test email sign up objectives, time spent on page, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've been able to scale up that mushroom coffee brand specifically quite a bit using some of those awareness keywords, and just eventually it became the focal point of our spend as opposed to those typical mushroom coffee keywords. We went entirely into awareness because, I mean, with mushrooms specifically in that industry, tons of people want to learn about mushrooms, right? It's a huge fad at the moment. Everybody wants to have their reishi and their chaga and their lion's mane in the morning.
100%.
So there's a ton of search volume. We just needed to adjust the post-click experience. So we started sending them to blog pages that were also optimized for conversions. So it would have, explanatory paragraphs about what lion's mane is, the benefits of it, why you should be taking it. And then there would be a salesy part at the end, but also an email sign up. So even if we could get an email sign up for like 40, 50 cents, we would be happy with that because their email list converts very well. And we were still able to hit almost an identical ROAS to what we were getting previously with our mushroom coffee keywords. But the traffic was so much higher intent. We were getting so many email signups for the brand that it became worth it in the end. And so we started expanding that to other brands as well, just moving more into the more like inexpensive upper funnel awareness keywords away from kind of like those more middle of funnel keywords, saving a ton of money and building really strong brand awareness by just using Google for what it does best, which is educate people, right? Because when you're Googling something, like 95% of the time, like you don't want to just be sent to a PDP, right? Like you're looking to learn something, you're looking to read, explore, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, just that mindset shift has been huge, I think, for a lot of brands. And then, of course, it gets post-click testing really heavily involved, which I know is a big part of other paid platforms, but traditionally isn't as leveraged in Google, in my experience. So really by just like shifting that post-click journey a little bit, I think sky's the limit really for what we can do moving forward. It's something that, we've really just started exploring over the last kind of 6 months here. But it's been, I think, a huge boost to almost all of the brands that we've been doing it for. And of course, there will be brands where there isn't as much people looking, like users looking for education about that specific product. But with industries where there is, it's a huge advantage.
You just get them in your funnel as opposed to trying to get them in your funnel while you're going against 100 other mushroom coffee brands. You get them in your funnel for this, and then you either get their email, maybe the Facebook, maybe you're getting them on Facebook, maybe, they're in your funnel at that point, and there's a lot. It's a different game at that point than when you're competing on that $8 keyword right off the hop.
100%. And like, what's the brand awareness when somebody just clicks, goes to your PDP, is like, meh, too expensive, bounces.
Yeah.
Like, are they really going to know your brand moving forward? Are they likely to search you again? In my mind, like most likely not. But if you've educated them while subtly slipping in like why your brand is the best version of this, then in my mind, you've built a positive image of your brand in that user's mind, which, I mean, brands pay millions of dollars to do that. So yeah, definitely like important part of the puzzle, I think.
And to bring it back to the very beginning, it sounds like the master splinter approach where you want to teach. First, you want to teach, impart your lesson, impart your wisdom so that the turtles keep coming back to your particular sewer.
100%. And I don't want to say that I've gotten like all of my media buying experience from TMNT, but
yeah,
it has valuable lessons to impart, I think.
All right. Now, I just got off a conversation actually with, and Cam from Hexclad is going to be on the podcast. And he's specific. One of the things he wanted to talk about was how brands are overspending on branded search. And I know if you go back on our podcast, we've talked a lot about the value of bidding on branded keywords and having that be part of your campaign. But Cameron was just telling me about a brand, and it wasn't Hexclad. It was a brand he worked with before where they were spending so much on branded search. When he kind of came in and started working with them, he advised that they take off all their branded search, put Hotjar on the website. And he found that something like 80% of the spend that was going into that branded search campaign was previous customers trying to log into their website. So it was just a perfect, crystal clear example of how if you're not watching and really segmenting out how much you're spending on branded keywords, the system will allow that to take over and really overspend. What are you seeing with that?
The right answer to that question is like, should we be spending on branded search? It depends, right? Like you have to dive into the data. In general, though, of those accounts I'm auditing every year, I would say that like probably 80% of them are overspending on branded search. And it's super easy for a brand to measure. So like this is another very simple experiment that every brand should be running, especially because, again, of these accounts that I'm auditing, the vast majority of them, their highest spending campaign every single time is branded search. And so think about like what a branded search is, first of all, right? It's somebody typing in your brand name, of course, and then that first result on the Google page is going to be a branded ad. The vast majority of the time, if your SEO is very good, you will own those 2 to 3 organic listings underneath that branded ad. So why are we in those situations where there's no competition and you have very strong SEO? Maybe you're not running on Amazon because Amazon's been sneaking into the organic listings lately. Why are we spending money on an ad that people will just click the free version of directly below? Now, things change when there's competition on your branded ad. So if you have a brand called Brand X and then Brand Y is bidding on those keywords, you don't want their ad to show instead of yours. In situations like that, you're going to want to spend on brand. But how much do we spend on brand? That's the really important question for us to ask ourselves as Google marketers. And how we can determine that is, say you're spending $10,000 a month on branded search. Pull back to $5,000 month one, and then watch what happens to GA4 organic revenue. So GA4 will segment all revenue into buckets. It's very good at tracking Google revenue specifically, less good at tracking Meta and TikTok and all those other platforms, but it's very accurate for Google. So we can trust that data. When you pull back on branded spend, immediately what most agencies will see is their in-platform branded search revenue going down. That makes total sense, right? You're showing branded ads less. You are now generating less revenue through that branded ad. But what you'll see the vast majority of the time is that organic revenue is ticking upwards to the exact same degree that you're losing the in-platform revenue. And why is that? It's because people are typing in your brand. There's no branded ad there. They're going to the next listing below, which is the organic listing, which is the free listing that's not going to cost you any money. They're clicking on that and they're converting. When you're typing in a brand, and even if there's a competitor there, like if you're wanting to buy Nike shoes, for example, you type in Nike shoes, and then all of a sudden like Hoka comes out of nowhere with an ad, like, are you that likely to purchase a Hoka shoe in that moment when they just send you straight to their PDP or straight to their homepage? Perhaps, but like less likely than you are to just click on that Nike organic listing and purchase. So that's the experiment that we run again on pretty much every brand that we have, is slowing down the branded spend, seeing what happens to the organic revenue. 9 times out of 10, like brands could use a 20 to 30% branded spend cutback. And the Google algorithm is really good, right? So it's like, if you're using automated bidding and you say, okay, I only want to bid on the like likeliest to purchase consumers, and then everybody else is, I don't really want to waste branded spend on that. It can hit those ROAS numbers for you very effectively. So yeah, that's the really important part, is just pull back on branded spend, especially if it's like the vast majority of your account spend. See what happens on that organic revenue. Like the vast majority of the time, you'll see that it's not making a difference on your guys' bottom line. You're getting that revenue regardless, and you've just been overspending on branded search. Now, when that can change is, Amazon is a big one these days. Amazon has really upped their Google ad spend in the last year. So what we're seeing now is that if you're not spending money on branded search, people will filter through to your Amazon listings, right? So it's a bit of a push and pull, and you'll have to like experiment with maybe like 5 to 15 different spend levels and see which one is most optimal for your brand relative to all the other competition in the niche.
What about with PMax? Because I understand if you don't take branded search out of PMax, it can come to be a big part of your PMax campaigns as well. What's your position on branded search in your PMax campaigns?
Just something you have to test. Google released like 6 months ago the ability to negate branded keywords in PMax. It's something that I like to do because with all of Google, you get pretty good insight into the search terms that your campaigns are showing ads for, right? So like you have a branded campaign, you can see exactly which terms are coming in. For that example that you just quoted, like people searching like the login page, like that is a big no-no. Like you usually want to have like login, like change password, contact. A lot of that time, like you don't want to spend money on those searches. With PMax, though, it's a little bit more nuanced because it only gives you like roughly 30 to 40% of the actual search queries that people are typing into Google. That means like 60% of the searches that PMax is spending on, it's a big question mark, right? So it could be brand, could be non-brand, it could be display placements. It's impossible to know. So I tend to like adding those negatives to my PMax campaigns purely from a data granularity perspective. That way, when I'm analyzing campaigns, I can say, these are my branded campaigns. These are my non-branded campaigns. I have that clarity and kind of finality when I look at those. With PMax having branded in it, you just don't get that, right? PMax will do the exact same thing. Like it will serve on branded search regardless. And then worstly, like it'll make it so that you don't know how much you're exactly spending on branded search, right? Because it is that black box. PMax spends $10,000 a month. It could be anywhere from $3,000 to like $9,000 of that $10,000 spend is actually going towards branded search, and you just don't know. So when you're doing these kind of spend experiments, it would be important to have those branded negatives added to the PMax campaigns purely so you can make just like better calls on the data that you're actually getting.
Super cool. So many, usable tips here. I really think that the awareness keywords one is one every listener should really go in and do a little whiteboarding exercise on how do you go further up the stream to try to capture that intent and awareness earlier. Great triumphant return to the podcast today, Raph.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'll be back, I'm sure,
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. You got to become a regular now. You're in Lima right now. You're in Lima, Peru. You're on the other side of the continent. What's it like down there?
Oh my God, it's beautiful. Yeah, no, anybody looking for a beach vacation, you got to come down to Peru. Machu Picchu, very cool as well.
Machu Picchu.
Yeah, it was unreal. The altitude though was tough. I took a few client calls and was just extremely out of breath and was asked multiple times, like, were you just exercising? I'm like, nope, just this is my resting heart rate now.
I'm just at Machu Picchu. You drop that, show a little with it.
That was the dream, man. Actually, the client call with the Machu Picchu in the background. No cell reception, funnily enough, up there. So.
No, fair enough. Nice, man. Well, great to see you again, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Eric, and chat soon here.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're not getting the D2C newsletter, you can subscribe for free at directtoconsumer.co. And if you want to learn more about Pilothouse's all-killer, no-filler services, take off to pilothouse.co. I'm Eric Dick, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.